Nearly there, comrades. You've been sitting on those benches for 2 days now, but the finishing line is in sight. The struggle for socialism demands cheeks of steel. I was door knocking in Ferry Hill last weekend to get our latest Labour councillor elected, and well done, Curtis Barry. It's the start of winning back County Durham. A woman answered the door and I said, "Hi, I'm Jamie from the Labour Party. We'll be voting in a by-election on Thursday." And she said, "Yeah, we'll definitely be voting Labour. You have to, don't you?" And a little girl was there in a onesie, smiling, and I gave her a high five. And I got this sense of a dam about to burst. So I asked, "How are things affecting you?" And Bethany told me her story. She works 2 part-time minimum wage jobs in shops in Chestnut Street. The bus stop's a hike from her home. There's 1 bus an hour, and it's unreliable because of the traffic. It costs her £10.90 to get to work and back. It costs her £8 for her daughter's childcare. When she works the 10 till 2 shift, she has to leave the house at 8 a.m. to drop her daughter off, and she gets home at 4 p.m. It's costing her £19.80 for transport and childcare, which means it's taking her 8 hours to earn less than £17 in net wages. And she told me she can't see where it ends. She's worried about her energy bills shooting up. They're offering help, she says, but then you have to pay it back, and you know it's going to take phone call after phone call just to get it. And she says, you hear these people saying you've got to learn to manage your money. I'm on top of every penny, and it affects your mental health, and it affects your kids. And she was kind, and she was eloquent, and she was working every hour she can get from her employers to build a better life for her little girl. But she's worried she's going to be in the same position in 20 years' time. I grew up in the 70s and the early 80s, and I remember we used to have park keepers. We used to have youth clubs. I never saw homeless people sleeping in doorways. Bus conductors helped parents with buggies. My mum worked part-time as a telephonist. My dad was a shift worker at ICI. And despite raising 4 kids, they could afford to buy a house when they were young. There was no such thing as a food bank. They just weren't needed. I left school at 16, worked in a plumbing and heating factory. And if you wanted to order some new materials, you had to get an order book and some carbon paper. Do you remember carbon paper? And you had to handwrite an order and walk across the factory and hand it to one of the women in the typing pool, and there were all women. And she would put it into a typewriter and type the letter and put it in an envelope and post it to the supplier. These days, to order materials, you get a scanner and you go, beep. So what I want to know is, if we're so much more productive today, where has all the money gone?
Yes.
Why can't we afford park keepers and youth workers and guards on trains? Why are working people, queuing up at food banks? It's because tax dodgers and oligarchs are asset stripping our country. We all remember Storm Arwen before Christmas, when 5,000 northeast homes had no electricity for a fortnight. Kids studying by torchlight, families huddled round candles, chairlifts out of power. Northern Power Grid is privately owned by Berkshire Hathaway Energy, previously known as Mid-American Energy Holdings Company, which is run by Warren Buffett, who has a personal fortune of $102 billion. Northern Power Grid makes $125 million profit a year on a turnover of $355 million. Over £100 million a year extracted from our region instead of being reinvested into resilient infrastructure. Can't help thinking there's a better system. And we see the same in the NHS and probation and local government with PFI. Outsourcing and privatisation is not about efficiency. It never was. It's about the mega rich taking our money and leaving people like Bethany struggling to work on expensive buses. Boris Johnson wants to pretend his is a new government, but the same Tories have been in power since 2010. Austerity has smashed the UK's resilience. COVID hit so hard because of underfunded emergency planning and preparedness. Police and fire budgets slashed, ambulance services on their knees, local authority capabilities destroyed. Over 2.5 million people used food banks last year. That's storing such a crisis for the future. They've gone beyond asset stripping our infrastructure. They're now asset stripping our children, our parents, and our families. And this isn't just about Johnson. Whichever Tory MP replaces him, It'll be someone who broke their manifesto pledge and piled national insurance hikes on working people, who voted to refuse hungry kids school meals through the holidays, who voted to cover up the corruption of Tory MP Owen Paterson, debasing his elected office by selling ministerial access for cash. Is there a better metaphor for this government than voting to allow privatised water companies to pump raw sewage into our rivers?
Yeah.
And it's not just economic injustice. 732 sub-postmasters wrongfully prosecuted. The government spending 1.6 million on lawyers to oppose victims. No one held accountable. 97 unlawful deaths at Hillsborough, 30 years to get to the truth, but no one held accountable. 95 miners wrongfully charged after Orgreave, no one held accountable for the perjury and fabricated evidence. 71 people killed at Grenfell, 24 Shrewsbury pickets wrongfully prosecuted. Thousands of families bereaved by COVID and an inquiry kicked into the long grass. What needs levelling up is the scales of justice. We need a Hillsborough law with a duty of canvass of all public officials. And I thought we were making progress in this country against racism and bigotry. But women and girls do not feel safe in public. Men and boys have a moral obligation to step up and call out the violence and misogynistic and sexist attitudes from other men and boys. The right-wing media have promoted Farage and fueled dog-whistle bigotry. Johnson is openly homophobic, racist and Islamophobic. Priti Patel tried to stop lifeboats saving refugee families from drowning at sea. The good news, though, is the British public responded and the RNLI has had its best ever year of donations. And that's where the hope lies. The vast majority of people are decent and want to be respected. We saw a groundswell of mutual aid through COVID. The vast majority of businesses want to look after their workers. And by the way, this idea that Labour was ever hostile to business is rubbish. It's tax dodging and fire and rehire and asset stripping we want to eradicate. Something we share with every ethical business out there. The North of Tyne Good Work pledge is backed by the CBI and the North East Chamber of Commerce. Qualifying employers pay the real living wage, recognise the role of trade unions, ban exploitative practices like fire and rehire, treat mental health at work as seriously as physical health and safety. The North of Tyne Good Work pledge now covers 35,000 workers, and a Labour government would apply these standards to all of Britain's 31 million workers on day one with our new deal for working people. And well done, Andy McDonald, for that green paper. Britain's 5.5 million small business owners should be natural Labour voters. Like us, they want a level playing field. We've helped over 1,700 small businesses with advice and support or direct investment. We helped a local cycling firm develop an internet-savvy customer journey so they can increase sales of eco-holidays and employ more staff. We helped a local joinery firm digitise their production. This is investment in the real economy in firms that pay their taxes and are paying their workers properly. I've been mayor for 2 years and 10 months now. We set up a brand new combined authority from scratch. On my first day, we didn't even have marker pens for the whiteboards. I declared a climate emergency. Our Green New Deal is now operational to fund mine water energy, low carbon manufacturing in local firms, restoring peat bogs to increase biodiversity, to help public sector buildings generate renewable energy. We've invested in Battleship Wharf in Blyth, in the Swan Hunter shipyard site for offshore wind, and I'm looking forward to the day we see engineers back working there. That will be iconic. Our Culture and Creative Fund supports freelancers in arts and culture. Kids are getting a hands-on climate education, measuring biodiversity at primary school, working with real engineering challenges at secondary. Sixth formers working with computer game developers on climate change games. Our Space Hive crowdfunder directly empowers communities to choose their own projects. We've funded community gardens in Newcastle, beekeeping on the Meadowell, beach wheelchairs at Cullercoats. We're building community-led housing and social housing on brownfield sites. But we still need a change in the law to make council housing viable again. The Tories have cut the Union Learn project, but we've restored it here. made it stronger because unionised workplaces are more productive, they're safer, and they have lower staff turnover. Labour politicians must never shy away from standing with our sisters and brothers in the trade unions. And I'm proud to say our organisation has a gender pay gap of 0. Our skills programme leaves no one behind. Individual coaching and support for people with autism or neurodiversity. And young people who've had a tough start in life, and adults with complex needs around mental health and substance abuse. In our first year, during a pandemic, 28,800 people enrolled in adult skills courses. The number of working age adults now without qualifications has fallen from 7.1% to 6% in just 1 year. We're working with co-ops and socially trading organisations like charities with our £15 million Access to Finance Fund, recycling money in our region. We've brought digital tech firms here, Verisure, ThoughtWorks, Explore, Monster Labs and Version 1, each creating hundreds of highly paid jobs. Every pound we spend returns over £3 to Treasury in payroll taxes alone. Government set us a 30-year target of 10,000 jobs. By now, we should have a pipeline of 944 new jobs. The reality, 4,484 new jobs and another 2,700 jobs. Another 2,700 jobs saved by our investment through the pandemic. That's 13 years progress in 3 years. So if anybody ever tells you that Labour don't know how to run an economy, you send them to me. Imagine what we could do with the levers of power national government has. Britain needs a Labour government that will deliver long-term investment in the health and education of our people. And we need a Labour government to guide us through a world that is more dangerous than I can ever remember. World leaders have not stepped up to the challenge of climate change. Fossil fuel companies make billions in profits. Tory donors have been granted oil and gas exploration licenses in the middle of a climate emergency. Time for a windfall tax, I think. And the sovereign nation of Ukraine has been invaded. If democracy is to mean anything, Vladimir Putin must face a court for war crimes, as all warmongers must. High office and powerful friends should offer no immunity. But let's not be seduced by jingoism. The human cost will be horrible. Russian and Ukrainian families are going to lose sons and fathers and husbands to war, daughters and mothers and wives. It's not ordinary Russian families who started this. Russian peace protesters are being arrested in their thousands. It's billionaire oligarchs who threaten our security. Russian, American, British non-dom expats. The same predatory financial system that backed Trump backs Putin and corrupts our world. For too long, the City of London has been the global epicentre of dirty money laundering. And I want to see an incoming Labour government with the guts to stand up to billionaire oligarchs whose financial greed and bullying fuels war and poverty and recklessly destroys our planet. And let's have a wealth tax while we're on, shall we? No previous generation has faced a global pandemic, the conceivable escalation to nuclear war, and the existential threat of climate catastrophe. The dark forces of racism and misogyny are rising. Britain has a Prime Minister who is debasing democracy. I worry for the future of my children. Few people get the chance to be on a pitch at a time of historical crisis. We must raise our game. Me, you, Kia, all of us. The world and future generations demand nothing less of us. This will not be easy. We will not win every battle. And at times it will feel exhausting. We must hold our course for economic and social and climate justice and not sink to throwing red meat to appease those who play from the handbook of hate. What will be the future if we trade justice for a tabloid headline? So thank you to our MPs and peers fighting for integrity across the chamber. Thank you to our staff making events like this happen. Thank you to our councillors and PCCs fighting every day to shield our communities from the backwash of austerity. Thank you to our trade unionists fighting for dignity in work. And thank you to our members organising and door knocking and fighting for a better world for all of us. I just want to say this to our youth delegates. Everyone in the Labour movement has heard the stories of the Chartists, the Tolpuddle Martyrs, the suffragettes, the Jarrow Marchers, the Battle of Cable Street. I admire these people. Many of the freedoms and rights that we enjoy today were won by them in struggle. They were never freely given. Learn from them, and from your older comrades, and from people in office. They have much to teach. But do not be in awe of them, for you will write your own page in history. The task ahead of us is formidable, and the forces against us are brutal. But socialism will endure so long as there is injustice to fight. The future is not yet written. This is our world, comrades. Let's claim it.